okay, I'm assuming everything's working now, but everyone who knows my history with tech knows I'm not very, very good at anything like this. So it says it's recording, everything's working, so I'm just going to go into it from there. But hey, Emily, how's it going? Thanks so much for coming. I mean, how are you? Things okay?
I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, it's been a really exciting couple of weeks for me, really. But yeah, no, really good. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Well, we'll get into those exciting things in a few minutes. But yeah, I'm just boiling at the minute. I know this won't do well in terms of reviewing or readership, whatever. But it's like 32 degrees or something in my flat, and I just don't deal well with the heat. I'm a winter baby. Are you the same, or is this like heaven for you?
Yeah, no, I am a February baby, so for me, it's the all the way winter. Well, I prefer spring and autumn because it's not so hot. It's normally about 17, 18 degrees.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Me. But the heat, I get a bit angry in the heat. I can't handle it very well. Um,
Oh
but
my god.
yeah, I'm hoping that with a nice breeze. If there's a nice breeze,
Yeah.
okay.
Cool. So if you start like cursing me out in the middle of this, it's not my fault. It's the heat. We can just put it down, put it down to the heat. Perfect. Well, I think what you mentioned there, like my dad calls it football weather. So like perfect football weather is like my ideal thing: bright, cold, cool, perfect. And you know what? While we're on the subject of football, women's Euros obviously going on at the minute. It's probably the first women's competition that I've watched pretty much every single game all the way through. And England, at the time of recording this, we're technically through to the quarterfinals or round of 16, whatever you call it. 7 goals scored, no goals conceded. I mean, it's looking like a pretty decent Euros for us. So, how far do you reckon we'll go?
I think we could go all the way if I'm completely
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah,
I think it's crazy if you look back over the last sort of couple of years. Women's football's really come on a long way in terms
Yeah.
of
yeah,
being more in the media. People are talking about it. I've had messages that that men that normally don't watch women's football, they're watching it this tournament, which to me, there's obviously a big buzz about this year. I mean, obviously the men had it last year, getting to the final. So
Yeah.
everyone's now really on that football bug. We could do really well as a nation, and I think everyone's got that bug again this year.
Yeah.
If
yeah.
you're not even into women's football, I think you are watching or keeping an eye on England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am. Yeah, I think we.
Yeah, I reckon so as well. As long as Beth Mead keeps doing what she's doing, I think we're we're pretty much gonna go as far as we can. But it's an interesting point, because I agree. Like I think in the last, I don't even know how many years, maybe 5 years actually, probably since the last World Cup is probably when women's football has made it a bit more into the mainstream world. Like you've seen it a lot on Sky Sports, you see it on BBC, on ITV, and it's more of a active conversation. Like, what do you think has kind of spurred that on, or like why do you think that is?
I think the world is changing, and I think it's more the accessibility. So even for me, I was predominantly a male football fan, as of the men's team,
Yeah.
because it was easier to watch. I mean, I had a season ticket. I go down every weekend. It was on a Saturday, so it was easier for me to get to. And in my head, Sundays were really sort of days where you spend at home. And women's football always seemed to be really played on a Sunday, and it's something that I just never really got into until really I started going before the pandemic down to Birmingham City Ladies or Women, and I used to go and watch them as much as I could. I think it's the accessibility now. Everything's on social media, on television, on the radio. There's a lot more coverage, and I think it's long overdue. Women were playing football in the 1920s, before it got banned. So it is long overdue, and I think it is the accessibility. If it wasn't for being able to watch things on telly or hearing it on the radio, I don't think even I would have been able to get into the game as easily because it's just not. It wasn't accessible. I mean, I remember. It must be about 10 years ago. Back in the day, it was Bristol Academy, and my dad put it on telly. I think it was the cup final or something. And I'd never watched a game of women's football before. I didn't really know to that extent that women were able to play games that would be put on telly.
Mm-hmm.
So we've come such a long way in the last decade that women are now getting that equal opportunity. And it is thanks to the likes of BBC, ITV, or Sky, all the platforms that are really allowing those equal measures to be shown.
Yeah, for sure. And I quite like how it's become not as, I don't know, before, I think in the earlier stages, I don't know if it's just me, but I thought it was a bit tokenistic at times to just kind of show it for the sake of showing it without putting the coverage behind it, without putting the right people in the right places. The production value needed to be there. This Euros, they've smashed it. The World Cup, they smashed it as well, to be fair. But this Euros, there's proper analysis, there's proper people. You got Emma Hayes talking. I could listen to her forever, to be fair. But like, you got all these people sort of actively involved in it now. And I think what's quite nice as well is that everyone in men's football, because I guess that's the traditional thing that people are sort of used to, they always have that player that kind of brought them into the game that they love to watch. And I've now got my own women's footballer as well, and it's like that's something that 10 years ago I don't think anyone would have said. But when you were going down to watch Birmingham City Ladies or whoever you've seen kind of at that time, was there a specific player or a few players that kind of stood out to you that kind of brought you in more than others did?
Not particularly. I think what it was the women's team were a lot more approachable. So after the game, they'd come over and they'd speak to the fans. The following wasn't massive, but they took the time out on a personal level to understand the fans, to speak to them, to take time when they could be going home and spending it with their families. They actually came and spoke to the fans. So I think in general, the whole team ethos was very different. I'm not sure. I can't speak for other women's clubs. But it wasn't you play 90 minutes and you go down the tunnel. It was you play 90 minutes and then you speak to the fans about the game and what their thoughts were, and really taking into account their feelings and their opinions. So that for me is what really sort of brought me into women's football, because I thought, actually, they actually really want to know what the fans are thinking and feeling and understand what they can improve from a different aspect. And I just think that the dynamic is completely different.
Yeah, that's so true, because I'm a United fan. I'm not sure who you support, but I don't feel connected to any of the United players. I never really have, but then to be honest, we were quite depressingly late to start a women's team. We should have started it a very long time ago. I think Chelsea and Arsenal are probably the front, and Reading, to be fair, are probably the front runners in the UK for that, and the Midlands clubs kind of took over as well. But I remember watching something about, I think Ollie Solskjaer's daughter ended up playing for United at one point. Might have been last season, actually. And I just thought, you see her going in, signing autographs, talking to people, taking selfies. And it's not for a PR reason. It's not because they're told to do it. It's not because they feel like they have to do it. It's because you actually get the feeling that they want to do it. And that's kind of the whole point. And the women's community, or the women's football community, has now grown to a point where I think it's sort of becoming a bit of a generational thing now. So there's always a time where you look back, like you could look back at men's football and think there's a period which it like crowds started to change, people started to change, and football became more part of your life. And then we're now actually we're seeing it in real time with women's football, which is quite rare. Like, you don't get to see it in a lot of sports with that. And what I think is quite key as well is that only, I think last week it might have been, I think Newcastle announced that they were going to do a developmental setup specifically for women's football, which obviously had been there for men's the entire time. So as we see this kind of go on, it can only be better for all of us in society, really, that women can get more involved in football. And do you think that we've kind of taken a leaf from what we've seen in other countries as well? Because you see, only last season, what was it, they sold out the Camp Nou for the Femenina El Clasico. So are we sort of taking a leaf out of their book, and is it now that England are kind of on a similar wavelength to most of Europe, or is it just like, has there anything kind of led to that, do you think, or is it just something that's organically spread over time?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I think a lot of women in this country have really wanted to get more involved in football in general, and I think allowing more women's football to be seen on telly organically makes you want to go watch your local team play whenever they may play. But also, I think when you do see, like, the Camp Nou, I think it was over 90,000 tickets sold or something. That, it's just amazing, and you can take a leaf out of their book and just think, actually, if they can do it, why can't we be doing it in the UK? Obviously, America have been so on top of their women's game for a long time, but their setup in the terms of football, or soccer as they call it, is so different to the UK. that it was probably easier for them to be a bit more equal because there's not so many layers to their game. Obviously, we have the relegation and promotion, and they don't in the men's at least. So I think we're turning a corner, and I think it's growing organically. We were also taking inspiration from other countries and saying, "Wow, if we can do it, you can do it. Why can't we?"
Yeah. And you mentioned the USA as well, to be fair. So I don't know if this is embarrassing as well, but the only reason I kind of knew that US women's soccer was a thing was because of Bend It Like Beckham. Have you ever watched it? I watched that so many times. Being South Asian myself, there's not a single Indian who hasn't watched it, to be fair. But yeah, wasn't it the plot that what was it? Jessie Bamra, that was her name. Yeah, that's it. She and Keira Knightley end up getting a shot. They're at Kidderminster Harriers and they get a shot to go into America, and that was like the big thing then. And now you're kind of seeing some American players come here, so it's a massive switch up from that. But what is it that America has or did? You kind of touched on it with the difference in the league stature there, but what is it that they really did? And is it something that soccer's more bred through the school setup or the developmental setup more than it is here? But basically, what do they have that we didn't have, I guess?
I think they play a lot of sports throughout their school time, and we don't. I mean, as a woman myself, at school, I didn't have a girls' football team. There was very few football teams in the local area in general because I lived in the middle of nowhere. However, in the surrounding areas, it was all for boys. You never really heard of girls playing football. Whereas in America, you hear a lot of even people in their 40s and 50s, they played football at school. They had like a football team, and it didn't matter your gender, you just played football. And we didn't have that, or we don't have that. We have it more now, but it's something that I think was more a cultural thing for them to play sport in general, or many sports. And we would just play, the girls would play netball, the boys would play football, the girls would play hockey, and the boys would play rugby. And we're now crossing over those boundaries and saying, well, hang on. If they want to play netball, they can play netball. If we want to play football, we can play football. Whereas in America, always had that level playing field from what I see as an outsider looking in. So that's what I would say it is really. It just starts from a young age. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that even the US men's soccer team is now going to be on the same kind of pay earning as the women's team, which is a massive. It was a step I didn't see coming for a while, but it shows how kind of far ahead they are. I think Netherlands might have done it similarly as well. I remember seeing a picture of Miede Minderpie. It was probably something to do with that. But you mentioned as well kind of when you're in school in the UK schooling anyway, you're sort of put in a box from a sporting perspective. So I can't speak from experience. So I never looked at it in any sort of way. I just kind of thought that's how it was, and I didn't, you don't question things like that at a young age. But what was it like kind of back then, being a football fan and not being able to be given the opportunity that all the boys were getting just because they were boys and you weren't?
It was frustrating. I mean, I didn't really join the football fandom until I was about 13 years old. It's the 2010 World Cup. I remember it so vividly. Overnight, I became obsessed. The FIFA page was my homepage on my computer. I was obsessed. I got all the Panini stickers, and that was it. And Fernando Torres was my favourite player. Nice. Anyone that knows me will know that I really loved Fernando Torres. I had his shirts. I had a birthday cake, that my mate made on. I was a very big football fan of Fernando Torres. And he really was that player that got me into football. From a stereotypical girl point to begin with, but actually once I started watching football and the game itself, I was absolutely hooked and addicted. So I went back into school the next summer, and we had an opportunity as students to go play at Valencia in Spain. And I said to my dad, I really want to do this. And my mate Jade, we were the only two girls that signed up for this trip. And they came back to us and said that we can't go because we were girls. They couldn't field a girls' team, and we weren't allowed to go if they couldn't field a team. So my dad sent a message to them. He wrote a very strongly worded letter saying, you can't not let my daughter go because she's a girl. I understand about the fielding a team, but why can't you just let them go? And if they can't play in a team, they can still train, they can still do all the trips, they can still have the experience. But I suppose for safety reasons, they can't play in the team, which is fine, but just let them experience everything else.
Yeah.
Changed my mind. Me and Jade ended up going. And that was the best experience of my life. We trained at Valencia's training ground. We went to the Mestalla. It was just amazing. And I was so obsessed with the feeling of feeling included out there. The coaches spoke. Their English was good, but some people didn't understand them. I speak a bit of Spanish, so I got to translate, and they were really welcoming to me as a woman. Performing and playing in the team, and they were so lovely. I'll never forget that. And I went back to school. We didn't have a girls' football team, so I said, well, can we have one? And the school were great, actually. They got in a coach from the local university to come in and train us every Thursday, I think it was. I was never any good at sport, but I never let that stop me, because you don't have to be good to enjoy something. I mean, I can't head a ball, I can't kick a ball, but I tried, and that was the important thing for me, is that you don't have to be Ronaldo. You can just have fun with it, and that's what football's about, is just enjoying yourself. So it was frustrating. I did have a lot of barriers to overcome, but the people around me were actually really supportive in trying to break down those barriers. And it's been very, I've had challenges ever since then in similar scenarios, but that was the first couple of things that really stood out to me, that I needed to be like, right, I'm a girl and I need to prove people wrong about this. So
God, that's a class story about your dad, to be fair. For him to back case like that, that is absolutely awesome. Because I don't know many friends of mine who were interested in football, but especially when growing up, I think like there were a few, because I grew up in Birmingham, so a very kind of South Asian heavy community, and I think for us it was a lot like, take Bend It Like Beckham as an example. That just didn't happen. What you see in the film is actually accurate. It is really accurate, but from kind of just like, outside of religion and things, like just from a girl's perspective, you'd think, would a dad or a mum be as supportive and just say, just keep doing what society wants you to be in that kind of box and not venture out. So that's actually really cool that your dad did that, so big ups to him. But to love Fernando Torres, does that make you a Liverpool fan then, or do you?
No, my family's quite convoluted in the fact that my grandfather is a Liverpool fan, my dad's a Bristol City fan, my auntie's a Southampton fan. It's a bit mixed.
It's spread,
I went to study football business and media at university, and I'd never really been to football games just because they weren't really that safe for me as a child and as a teenager growing up. My dad couldn't go very often anyway, so when he did take me, he was quite protective. I went and I met my partner James, and he took me down to Birmingham City 5 years ago now, and I've had a season ticket 5 years. Absolutely obsessed, massive blue nose. I'm adopted Brummie.
Love that.
Was me, but I just sound a bit different, that's all.
Yeah, fair. Well, I'm supposed to be an adopted Brummie, and yet I'm here a United fan, so that's blame my dad for that. So I hate Torres. The fact you said that just burns me a little bit. I absolutely hate that kid. But no, that's really cool to hear. And like you mentioned something quite interesting there with the feeling of wanting to feel safe in a football stadium and probably not having that. Did that? So in your first, let's say, whether you're a season ticket or not, but going into Birmingham FC, for example, what is the experience like? I'm just asking purely, I have no idea what it's like. So could you shed some light on what it's actually like to be a teenage girl in a predominantly male dominated football stadium? Like, what kind of goes through your mind the second you walk and take your seat? Like, what are you thinking at that point?
So if I talk about St Andrews, where Blues play, it's a very different story to if I to an away game. So if I go to St Andrews, it's a very safe environment actually for women. We've recently done a survey as part of the Her Game 2 campaign, and actually the responses are pretty good. But I never felt unsafe at St Andrews from the home fans. At Blues, it's a very much a community-based club where, you know, if you're a blue nose, you're a blue nose, no matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like. So I never felt unsafe, and I always knew that if anything was to happen to me, that I would have the fan base, sort of someone would step in and save me or help me, which has happened a few times, which has been really lovely. But when I go to an away game and you're faced with away fans, the amount of abuse you can get if you're a woman is quite scary. So you can go to a away ground and people will, you know, point and swear at you or say stereotypical comments that, you know, aren't the nicest to hear. I mean, I think I grew a bit of a thick skin around it because I'd experienced it so often, and I don't look like a typical football fan. I've got, you know, I'm quite girly, so a lot of people sort of probably didn't expect me to like football. So you get those stereotypical comments, and it's just not a nice feeling. I sort of blocked them out for a long time, but it got to a point where I was just like, no, I don't have to put up with this. It doesn't matter that I'm a girl. I could probably talk your ear off about football and potentially may know more than you. Not saying I do, but I might. You know, chance, and we might have some level ground. So it isn't a nice feeling. It's not a nice feeling when you're treated badly in general, but especially when you're supposed to be somewhere doing something that you really are passionate about. It's actually quite crushing on the inside.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I've not been on the receiving end, but I have, not to sound like anything, but like I've stepped in and, you know, said things which other people I thought should have said it, and just to get others to pipe down. But I don't care what the reason is, whether it's you had too much to drink, you're too amped up, your team's losing, there's just no excuse for it. I think there are certain boundaries that you just don't cross no matter what it is, and basically the thing that someone can't change and doesn't have to change, that's the barrier that you shouldn't step over. But I do think it does, especially as there's always going to be people who are going to be set in their ways and disagree, whatever. But I think when you do see those people and you can actively help someone, I think it's more, this is what my dad always told me, you have a duty to step up and actually say something and do something, because God forbid anything happens that you could have stopped, you might as well stop the thing at source. So and I guess like when you have gone through those experiences as well, to then take that and create something like Her Game 2 and be a part of something that, for me, to be honest, it's one of the best campaigns that I've ever seen. I'm not just saying that because you're here, but like I remember the first video that came out. I think everyone remembers that video. It must have done crazy numbers, to be fair. But could you take me back to when it was created and sort of why it was created? Like, forget the success right now, but just like at the time, what was the main sort of like reason for that, and what was the mission statement behind it at the time?
So my friend Kaz, she approached me, it must have been in like the March or April time, and she asked if I wanted to be a part of this video. And to begin with, I was quite apprehensive. I wasn't very well at the time, and I was a bit nervous that I wouldn't be able to handle, this sounds really sad, I wouldn't be able to handle any backlash that came with it. That's the first thing I thought about. Wasn't, this could be fantastic, we could make a difference. It was the instinctive fear of, what are people going to say about me?
Yeah.
And in hindsight, that's exactly why we're doing this campaign, is to try and stop things like this happening. So eventually, when I sort of warmed up to the idea, I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we all planned what we wanted to put on our pieces of paper, which is what we'd experienced during our time as football fans. And mine was, you can't comment on a man's game, which I thought resonated quite well, because it's what I've experienced. Especially with the Valencia story, it really sort of fitted how I felt. So I was like, yeah, that's a good one. And our mission statement really was, and we didn't think it was going to go any further than the video at the time. We just thought, we can show people this is actually happening. This is happening week in, week out. And someone needs to say something, because the media weren't saying anything. No one was talking about it. And no one with a voice was making a difference with it, or not to the extremes that we wanted. You know, people were vaguely talking about it, but not to the levels that was needed for change.
Yeah.
So when the video went out, it was crazy. My phone was blowing up. and we surpassed 1 million views. My nan saw it on the news. She was like, Emily, what's this? Like, well done, it's this. And I explained, and my whole family were just like, this is really cool, because obviously they really support me and what I do. My dad, he's my biggest ally when it comes to football. He is brilliant, and he looks like Louis Theroux, which makes it even better. He's so good, and he was constantly sending me things like, you're trending on Twitter, I've seen it on the news, and it was great. And I think we didn't expect it to get as much momentum as it did, really. Like, when it surpassed that 1 million views, I think we were all crying, just more out of gratitude that people were listening to us. And the responses that we got was amazing, that people saying, thank you for saying something, because this is how I felt for a long time. And that's what it's all about. We wanted to give people that voice, because no one should be made to feel the way that we get made to feel a lot. And after that, it's blown up, really.
Yeah, well, you say that, I mean, like, I remember watching it for the first time. I think it's only like a 1 or 2 minute video, isn't it, with that song in the background? But if you wanted to get people to think, I think you did that, because even in my like tiny little world, I remember watching it and just feeling everything in those first few minutes, because I didn't know people were actually saying those things. Like, you kind of, because I'm privileged in this situation, I'll admit it, like, not through any fault, but like I am. So to actually see a phrase and the person behind it, I'm just like, who the hell could say? I can't get in the mind of someone who could say that to that person or anyone, to be honest. Some of them were horrible, but like some of the things on there were just so horrible, and it just didn't make any, like, you go through the whole thing, it just doesn't make sense. But then I just started thinking, God, who could say that? And then actually seeing the comments, God, loads of people are saying it. Like, the amount of likes it had, clearly people resonate with it. I'm just like, it just blew in that 2 minutes, it just completely blew my mind. And I was like, so all I could do then was just like retweet, share it, send it to everyone I knew, which I did, to be honest. But like, I know you didn't think that it would sort of take off the way it does. I don't think anyone expects something to go viral, but when it did, like, kind of, what was the first like meeting after that about? Like, did you have any idea where you were going to go next? Because now you've got like club partnerships, you've got ambassadors, you've got loads of people sort of jumping on it as well. So was that planned, like, after the video, or was that kind of organic as well?
I think it was quite organic, really. I mean, because I wasn't very well around the time of the video, I took a step back for a long time, and I just was the Birmingham City ambassador for a long time. But after the video came out, we all had a conversation about whether, someone wanted to be part of a lead team, like a shareholder type thing, or whether someone just wanted to just be an ambassador and do what they can when they can. And at the time, I said that I'd want to do what I can when I can, because obviously not being very well, and then having my work was very heavy at the time. So I said that, but then we sort of kept growing. So we had partnership after partnership after partnership, clubs contacting us wanting to get involved, us contacting clubs saying, do you want to hear what we've got to say, because we might be able to help your fans. And it was very organic in the end. And it got to probably about September time, and we were all like, right, this is big now, we can make a difference, we have got a voice now to give to those young girls, older women, people of all ages. We can, and even male allies that, like my dad, that want to speak about his daughter, giving them the voice. I think that's when we were like, we need to pursue this, because there's so many people that don't understand, not through any fault of their own, because they just haven't experienced it or don't know about it. But then there's so many people that probably say passing comments and don't understand the repercussions of them. I think even I've been guilty of that. You just say things in an environment because you've heard them and you think they're normal. Or think they're acceptable to say. But actually, when you sort of take a step back and think about it, you think, oh, actually, I shouldn't be saying things like that. It's not right, etc., etc. In football, you get a bit wrapped up in stuff, don't you? Like, there's naughty chants and things. With swear words and things that you don't want to repeat, and it's all about education. So I think that's what we wanted to do. Is we wanted to roll something out that we could say to people, well, actually, this, you shouldn't say things like this, but this is what you can do to support women, and basically make a negative into a positive.
Yeah, you know what? It got me as well because I thought I was a good ally to begin with. I don't know if a lot of people felt the same, like in my shoes at the time, but I remember watching it and I thought, I watched it and I thought all those emotions, like I said before, but then afterwards I kind of reflected and I thought, you know what? I'm on the good side. Like you always think there's a good and a bad side to this. I put myself immediately on the good side, but then I thought it was what you said there with like the throwaway statements and all of those. I had to look properly deep into myself and say, I need to stop making certain statements. None of them were terrible, and I'd happily repeat them. They weren't horrible, obviously, but it's but it's like it's still subliminally or obviously putting women's football down and putting it as if it's less than the men's game, or that it's not worthy of the payments that people are saying, or like the viewership and things. And it's just like, that's not the point. The whole point is to have the equal opportunity for them to have that, and for everyone to have it. It's not just gender. It turns into, then it becomes like a race thing, comes an ability perspective. It all feeds into it, but it's at that core you have to sort of have those hard conversations with yourself. And I think what you guys definitely did that. And I'm interested to hear more about the partnership angle, because that's when you're actually partnering with football clubs, which are the bedrock of this whole debate, but also where you probably come into contact with people who are diehard men's football fans, and think there's probably no other way than the men's game, and all of a sudden they're partnering with this foundation which is all about women's football, and the clubs have been quite active in that. I remember seeing was it Leeds who had her game 2 training shirts, I think, before a Liverpool game, and I think there was a picture of Luke Ayling that just went everywhere, and I was like, this is mental. But I also think there must be some Leeds fans who looked at that and thought, God, what's the world come to? It's all going to be going to shit now, because this is what's happening. But not, obviously they haven't had that conversation. So do you remember the first partnership that you had, and sort of how that came about and how it led on to the other ones?
Oh goodness, I can't remember the very first one. If I'm completely honest, it's all been such a blur.
Yeah.
Because it's just all been so overwhelming and massively positive. Yeah. Obviously, for me, the one that sticks out in my mind is Birmingham City, because I had so much to do with the lead up to it. All the others I was almost like a spectator for. However, actually, no, that's a lie. I did originally get some contacts for Peterborough, who partnered quite early on. Walsall partnered quite early on. And there was a couple of others that I was preliminary, can't say that word. You know what I mean? So actually, so they were the first ones that I really remember sticking out in my head that I had something to do with. But when it comes to a partnership, I think it means different things for different ambassadors, or what the club can offer. But for me, I can talk from the Birmingham City point of view, because I am their ambassador along with my mate Helena. So how it happened was, everyone had seen that I was part of the original video, and they didn't understand the club weren't getting involved, because we are a very inclusive club. We accept anyone and everyone. If you want to be a Blue Nose, come on board. You're one of our own. And a lot of people were tweeting our managing director, asking why we hadn't been on board yet. So I had a couple of meetings with him and some other people at the club, and they were really positive. They really wanted to get involved and do whatever they could, because they want to make the club a really inclusive place for people from no matter what your protected characteristic is. So from the Birmingham City partnership point of view, we had a dedicated fixture, which is funnily enough how I met Helena. We have posters around the ground. We have a report line. So Her Game 2 has this in general. On our website, there's a report line. So if you're at a game and you have you hear anything that's sexist, or you want to report something, either saying your name or confidentially, we will then take that report and give it to the relevant club, so that we will do the legwork for you, really, so that you are protected. So Birmingham City put that in place as well. They put the QR code all around the ground and in the programme as well, which has been massively helpful. we've done a survey recently, so we sent out to all the people that are signed up to marketing preferences on who are season ticket holders and people that have bought tickets more than 10 times in the last couple of seasons. We sent them a survey to understand how best to understand their needs as female football fans. The best thing that stands out to me was straight away, my now sort of colleague Jake, who works at the club, he fully understood what our issues were, and we said to him, look, there's no sanitary products available for us in the club. There's not really any. There is medicine, but if you're going straight from the train station, you don't have time. If you're a girl or something happens, being a woman, it can be very unpredictable. You need something there just in case. And he was all over it. And he didn't just get a basket like some other clubs did. He got a full-blown machine and put it in every single women's toilet in the ground, which is amazing. So he didn't just do the basics. He went above and beyond, which for me was like, wow. So really, and then the partnership is we advise the clubs on what we think is best for them to make it a more inclusive place for women. I've recommended more food options because a lot of our surrounding area are from a Muslim background, and there isn't much food options. There's no halal food options unless it's just vegetarian, which is mainly just cheese. And not everyone likes cheese. I don't really like cheese.
Same.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing for them. So how are we supposed to get people from other backgrounds, or girls that want to play or be a part of something from other backgrounds? They can't come and have anything. So I recommended that to them because we have a young girl in our academy who wrote a pamphlet on Ramadan, how to cope with that whilst playing football. And then so we're just trying to raise the profile for grassroots football with BCFC in the community. So there's a lot to it. It's not like that for every club. To be fair, Blues have done absolutely fantastic, and they've been amazing with me and Helena. But other clubs are just pledging their support with the report line, and just being there for women if they need it. So it can be as little as clubs want, or as massive as what Birmingham City have done, really. But they've been brilliant.
Yeah, fair play to the lad. He just jumped on the recommendation, sorted it, because he did it for all the right reasons, which is also key. Is you don't want to make people feel pressured into doing something. You want it to come from the goodness of their heart as well. And I guess for every guy that you meet like that, you might come across someone who just doesn't get it for whatever reason. Either they don't want to get it, or they just flat out can't get it because of what's been drummed into them before. So of course you've had all this success with Her Game too, but then inevitably when you come up against the people who just don't get it and who won't kind of take it on board the way you want, how do you deal with that? And what advice would you give to someone who's trying to do something good but people just can't see that yet? Is there a way that you overcome that with what you guys have done?
For me, it's all about education. So we had an incident where a guy didn't like the fact that the club had put in sanitary towels and tampons in the toilet. And I said to him, well, why do you think that way? Why do you think they're not a necessity? Because I'm genuinely curious, because I'm not a man. I don't understand his point of view, so I'd like to learn, just so that we can have that specific conversation, that maybe we can both understand each other's point of view. Not everyone is like that, and I didn't get a response. But for me, it's about being calm and speaking to people and trying to understand their point of view. You will get people that just say stuff for a reaction, and when it's things like that, it is best to leave it. Don't rise to it. My dad always tells me to ignore people. When I was younger, it was really hard to ignore people because you just want people to understand where you're coming from, and it's so frustrating when people don't. But as I've got a bit older, I've realised, well, actually, it's that phrase: the people that matter don't mind, and the people that mind don't matter.
Yeah.
So I think the best thing to do is stay calm, try and have a positive conversation about education on the topic. And if that's not possible, then unfortunately you will just have to ignore them, because they're the kind of people that you can't change.
Yeah. God, I couldn't have put that any better myself. And to be fair, the more I hear about your dad, I've just got a man crush on him. I've never met the lad. I don't even know what he looks like. What an absolute hero. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. It's there's always going to be people who will disagree with whatever you do, no matter how good or bad that thing is. So if you were to let just that one person kick you down, you forget about the thousands that you've probably helped that stayed silent. You've always got to maintain that frame of mind. But just a couple of quick fire questions. Well, I know we're quite conscious of time as well, but thanks so much as well. It's been a really fun chat. Really enjoyed getting to chat with you. But this is just a bit of fun, so try and clear your mind from what we've been speaking about before. It could be completely random, it could be completely focused on the topic. I haven't quite decided yet. We'll just see sort of how it goes. But first question, again, these are deliberately kind of vague and to like help you think a bit, so don't worry if your first answer isn't the correct one in hindsight. But who in your opinion is your GOAT women's footballer?
Oh God, Rachel Yankee.
Yeah.
The first one that ever sticks out in my mind. When I was younger, she's the only one that I really, really, really remember, and then it would be Alex Scott. So Rachel Yankee, yeah. Fair
enough. I know my choice. My choice would have been a Luco. That would always, she stands out as my main choice. Don't know why. I just see it's probably because she's on LinkedIn. You know, I see her constantly with like Angel City and things. She's on LinkedIn constantly. I just like absolutely love her, Luca, and she's on like Sky Sports and things. So it's probably where I see her the most. But seeing her days as a player, I was like, fair play. She was a baller, to be honest. With the upcoming Euros, like we kind of spoke about it at the beginning, who do you think will reach the final of the Euros this year?
Oh God, that's a really tough one, because I would have said Spain, England, if the way through the progression, if that's possible, I would have said that. I'm now not sure because Spain have lost two of their best players.
Yeah.
They're definitely going to get to the final.
Yeah.
But I don't know. No, I will go with Spain. I'll go with Spain because that was my gut. So I'll go with Spain, England, Spain.
Yeah.
Is France a stupid shout?
I'm thinking France. I don't know why. I feel like they...
Yeah, France could be potential good. I don't want that though, because one of my best mates is French, and she.
Class. Honestly, like watching them pump Italy was like just getting a bit of our own back on them. That's like the best. That's my highlight of the Euros so far. Forget the Norway game. That was actually class. But yeah, love that. And I guess with her game too, obviously with where it's been going so far, what do you think is the next step for her game too now?
So I've recently joined the lead team after not being part of the lead team for most of the time. For me, it's really about getting people on board that are really dedicated to the game and to our cause. I'm recently recruiting people internationally as well, which is really exciting. So I think we need to go international because there's so many women around the globe that don't have the same experience in football as we have in the UK. Could be better, could be worse, but we'd like to understand it. And then I also think that there's definitely so much more we can do with grassroots. We're hopefully going to be able to get more sponsors or generate more funds. We take nothing, by the way. We don't get paid for anything. We are all volunteers, do everything in our spare time or around work, So hopefully what our main aim is to promote grassroots football so we can give spaces and kits and resources to young girls at grassroots level. That's probably a thing. To be honest, there's so many things we could do, but it's all about just being able to do it one thing at a time. Another thing we've got in the pipeline is education piece. We want to be able to educate schools and offices and workplaces where we can make sexism almost eradicated. It will never ever fully go, but we want to be able to promote our message in different environments to make everyone more inclusive. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. That's sick. I left it deliberately open just to see kind of where you would take it. And the final one is a little bit deep. It sounds deep in my head when I do it. I'm just trying to hope it comes out a little bit less deep than what it is. But completely forget I'm here and imagine that you're talking to someone who they might be in school, just coming into university, who can't quite find their place in the football world, but they're a young woman, really want to get into it, and they just don't see enough avenues to, go for what they want to go for. What would be your best bit of advice that you could give them to take them on that journey with them?
I'd probably start by telling them, look, I'm from a really small town in the middle of nowhere, and I'm now helping change the landscape for women in sport, which is sounds. I've just said that, and that is deep. But you can come from anywhere and do anything. Anything is possible. It might not happen the first time. It did not happen for the first 6 or 7 times for me that I tried to get into the sporting industry. It doesn't happen. And maybe you weren't meant to be what you thought you wanted to be. I wanted to be a presenter. I haven't gone down that path. There hasn't been the opportunities to, but I've carried on in the world of sport and football, and I've found my way to something that I think I'm potentially better at, which is helping other people. So even if you don't end up doing the thing that you thought you wanted to do, stick at it, stay in and around the industry, because you may fall into something that you enjoy even more. Don't kill yourself trying to do anything. Your health is your wealth. Just keep doing what you love, and don't let anyone stop you or tell you no, unless you really need to be told no to doing something dangerous. But you just do what makes you happy, and don't ever let anyone tell you can't do anything because you're a girl.
I mean, we don't need an outro, do we? That's just done all my work for me. Honestly, at the beginning of the call, I really just wanted to find out more about Her Game Too, about yourself, and I've come away from it learning more than I really thought I could. So hopefully to everyone listening, you've also found something really useful out of this. I know I did. So thanks again, Emily, for coming on. It's been really great chatting to you. Funny, we only literally started talking, Monday? Literally Monday, I think, is the first time we chatted, which is mental. But honestly, I hope it's not the last time, and you and everyone that you work with at Her Game Too will have an ally in me for sure. So if you see me retweeting stuff, just let me be. I do it constantly. So I love what you guys are doing, and thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's been amazing. Thanks.
Cool.